Part 3. Friday evening, I held up the 2 pots of ice cream I had just taken out of the cooler. Hi honey, I'm home. Sorry to have taken so long. I've got a question for you, actually. Do we eat the ice cream right now before it gets any softer? And if so, do you want the pistachio or the double chocolate chip? She grinned widely. Hi, Grant. I like them both, but I think I'll take the pistachio, please. Although I reserve the right to dig my spoon into your pot. Or maybe we could swap halfway. We took the ice cream pots out onto the porch and sat in the 2 chairs I had found at the dump. I planned to take them with me if they would fit in the truck bed tied on top. They now had sentimental value to remind me of this place. I handed her a small steel spoon. She had now outgrown the flimsy plastic disposable utensils we'd been using. Indeed, I felt it would have been an insult to offer those to her. I leaned over and dropped a big heaping spoonful of my chocolate ice cream on top of her pistachio. She dug in. Thanks. That's nearly as good as mine. Maybe a little too sweet. It's great to have something cold. I'm going to have to get myself some kind of proper refrigeration, probably build a little shed nearby, so I don't have to keep kerosene or propane in the cabin. I'd eat a whole lot better if I could keep food for longer. Hey, I could even have leftovers occasionally, or maybe guests for supper. I spoke as if I intended to stay here after her release. I would really miss this place, and it might help to be able to tell her about the improvements I would have made if this had remained my home. Not that it was looking likely, but I wanted to share my dreams for the place with someone before I packed up and left. She laughed with me. You planning on keeping this place? I was silent for a moment before I replied. She deserved to know some of the truth, to know my true desire, even if I now had no choice but to abandon it. A new life in Missouri, or my current life in a federal penitentiary. Either way, I wouldn't be here. I'd really like to after a while. It gives me something I didn't know I was missing. Peace, tranquility, sweet cool water, green foliage. I'm not sure exactly what, perhaps the whole package. 160 acres, all my own. Something here sings out to me. I'd miss it if I ever had to leave. She nodded in agreement. I guess I can understand what you mean. It's a very special place. I'd love to have something similar myself one day. Somewhere I can totally chill out and get away from work. She was quiet for a while. The only sound was our spoons dipping into the soft ice cream and hitting the cardboard cups. She sighed with pleasure as she finished her treat. Thank you, Grant. I haven't done that for years, a whole pint in one sitting. It's always been a set portion in a china or glass dish. Me neither. It just seemed like the right evening for gorging on ice cream. I remembered I'd have to light the grill before we could eat. Miss Grayson, would you mind very much preparing the tomato salad while I get the coals going? She looked surprised. What are we eating? Steak, marinated ribeye. How do you like yours? She giggled. I am so totally not believing this. I've been kidnapped. He's bought me ice cream to enjoy out on the porch, and now he's going to cook me a steak supper? Medium rare, please. Do I get a beer while I'm cutting up the tomatoes? If you like. I've got some wine, but you'll have to forgive the beer glasses. I didn't get anything smaller. A beer first, then a glass of wine with the steak? You got it. I took her into the cabin, showed her the food I'd bought, then fetched the knife block and chopping board from my bedroom. Holler when you need anything else, Miss Grayson. I'll be just outside. I busied myself with the grill. I'd used it quite a few times before the kidnapping, just for myself. However, it had seemed too difficult to cook on it and feed a captive at the same time, which was why I'd been sticking to store-bought meals and the camping stove. I was looking forward to the treat. The steaks had looked good at the butcher's counter. The coals were soon started, and I went back inside the cabin, stupidly, not concentrating. Mr. Dumb, but happy. Big mistake letting my guard down, really dumb. Just like a lamb to the slaughter, I'd gotten sloppy. The girl chopping tomatoes turned around and stuck the knife at my throat. She grinned at the instinctive flash of fear in my eyes, then lowered the knife and put it back on the table before turning back to me. Grant, Miss Grayson was my father's spinster sister, my late Aunt Janie. The one who took me to Europe this summer before she died. The name my friends call me by is Laura. Do you think you might use it in the future, please? I stared at her as she giggled at my obvious astonishment. Then my face slowly broke into a rueful grin. I hadn't scared myself mainly because I hadn't been fast enough on the uptake to realize I was scared until it was all over. She hadn't stabbed me, so it was all okay. I had to summon up some saliva before I could speak. My mouth had just gotten as dry as dust. Thank you, Laura. I'd be honored to call you by your given name. She smiled back at me. Lord, She had a truly awesome smile. She was so out of my league. Smart, witty, beautiful, connected. God, I was going to miss having her around. The meal was great. The steaks tasted as good as they looked, and Laura had made a delicious tomato salad. The wine was just right, too. The company was even better. We chatted easily until those 4 dreadful words came. At least she used my given name first. Grant, we need to talk. I sighed. It had been good while it lasted. Time to pay the piper. Okay, Laura, let me refill our glasses first. So, Grant, the big question to start with. What exactly are you intending to do with me now that I know who you are? I paused for a moment, wondering if there were any particular words that might excuse me having kidnapped her. I couldn't think of any. I had already decided last night to do the same as I'd always intended. I'm still going to take you home in the morning before I leave town. I just wanted to buy you a steak dinner before we part, and taking you out to a restaurant seemed like a bad idea, as well as not giving me the privacy to say goodbye to you. I guess I don't want you to think I'm all bad. She looked me in the eyes, searching for any sign of deceit. There wasn't any. Thank you. It's the best solution for me and for you. You aren't a cold-blooded killer, and I don't want you to become one. Me neither. You don't deserve to be punished. You're actually a really nice person, and you should get a chance to live a long and useful life. The world is a better place with you in it. She gave me another huge smile, her white teeth shining. Grant, that's one of the nicest things anyone has ever said to me. It's the truth. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment before she straightened up. I've been thinking about a few things today, Grant. Your daughter, Ally. How old is she? Almost 4. Cute as a button, with curly blonde hair. Got it. Your ex, Cassie? Late 20s? Messy blonde hair, flashy style, always wearing big hoop earrings and bright lipstick. That's her, especially the hoops and the flashy style. Sounds like you've met her. I have, Grant. I'm pretty sure I've figured out what and where the problem is. Her new husband is named Logan O'Brien. He's my father's confidential clerk, and he's a slimy little man I've never liked. He's an officer of the court, and I'm guessing he put those false documents in front of Daddy, who was foolish enough to sign them without reading. The whole thing is just outright illegal. There are federal laws against it. O'Brien needs to go to jail for that. Geez, this restraining order alone is just outrageous. There's no way it can be enforced until after you've broken it. I've never heard of a divorce being final on the day of the first hearing. There's always a set time for reflection before it's all tied up. Daddy won't get off either. You could get him into big trouble for neglecting his duties. Allowing desertion as a reason for divorce while you were serving your country will land them both in front of an angry federal judge. The Departments of Defense and Justice will want to make an example out of them. I can just see some ambitious little prick in the Judge Advocate General's corps salivating at the opportunity to send a civilian judge to prison. You'll forgive me for not being eager to see my father grow old in some distant federal penitentiary. He may have been a fool, but he's the only dad I've got. I'm hoping we can find another way around this. I've been thinking about it all day, and I'm pretty sure I know how to handle it. I drew in a breath. If she knew what to do next, she was sharper than I was. I had no clue, other than to get the hell out of Dodge before her father nailed me to a wall. Okay, Laura, I'm willing to give you a chance to fix what happened. Maybe your father deserves nothing more than a world-class scolding, but this O'Brien guy and my ex need to face serious consequences for this. And I want my daughter back. She nodded again. Grant, I'm in your debt. Thank you for giving me this chance. I know you have no reason to love my father, but I don't think it was deliberate on his part. I agreed. I'm with you on O'Brien. An officer of the court abusing his position like that deserves serious jail time. You know why I think he's entirely to blame? You mean aside from him now being Cassie's husband? Yep. I racked my brain, but had no idea. She made a sweeping gesture. This place, they didn't know about it. It can't have been any competent divorce attorney who would have done a search to trace assets in your name. You bought this as Grant McKinney. You paid your property taxes too. Simple routine inquiry, and it wasn't done. So secrecy must have been vital. They relied on what Cassie knew, nothing more. What about the truck? She knew about that. It was parked up at the armory, wasn't it? They'd have had to produce the correct paperwork to claim it. The fewer people who knew about your divorce, the better. It wasn't worth the risk. I nodded thoughtfully. You make it sound so obvious. I've had time to think about the process. Any more wine in that bottle? One more each. Then it's back to the beer. I poured, and we raised our glasses to each other. So, what's Ally really like? I've only ever seen her in passing. She looks like a real little darling. She sure is. She's the main reason I wanted to buy this place, as a family cabin for weekends, so she'd have a chance to experience the outdoors and grow up comfortable with it. To have a childhood that wasn't dominated by cars, TV, and smartphones. That's really sweet. I think she'd love it out here. It's a truly beautiful place. I couldn't help but grin. I felt my judgment in buying the property completely vindicated by her approval. Laura, I've got a few photos of Ally that I took to Iraq with me. Want to see them? She did. I went and got them from my bedroom, and Laura told me what I already knew. My daughter was a real cutie. I shared a few stories about when Ally was small. I guess I shed a tear or two, as did Laura. The wine was finished, so I got us both another beer and sat down again, reaching for my phone to show Laura even more photos of Ally. That kind of broke the remaining ice between us. We talked and talked. I told her things I'd never shared with anyone else, and she confided a few things too. I quickly gathered from what she said that her life hadn't been as easy as it seemed. Being the judge's daughter had made her stand out at school, and not in a good way. She'd always felt that anyone interested in her was either after her family's money and connections or trying to use her to boost their own status. She laughed a bit drunkenly, remarking, "You're the first person who's ever put an exact number on how much of her father's wealth I wanted. You know, Bubba." Sorry, Grant. We both made some real dumb first assumptions about each other. I thought you were a worthless redneck high school dropout, out to make a quick buck and now in way over your head, having committed a big crime. Let me guess, you had me down as a stuck-up, spoiled rich girl with no idea how the other half lives? I laughed with her. The grin on her face spared me from actually having to answer. I guess she knew for sure I'd felt that way. I did give you some reasons why I might be a rural, hillbilly type, so you weren't being that dumb. Why I automatically assumed you were a wild, airhead party girl just from one newspaper photo, I don't know. That was unfair of me. I did you an injustice, and I apologize. She raised her eyebrows in question. Newspaper photo? Oh Lord, it's a long story. When I bought the coffee mugs and beer glasses from the Goodwill store, the lady kindly wrapped them in newspaper. I straightened it all out, and there was a photo of you and your folks. Hang on, I'll go get it. I brought the sheet of newsprint back from my room and handed it to her. She giggled when she saw the picture of herself. Oh my, that was one of the most tedious evenings I've ever had to endure. If it hadn't been for such a great cause, I'd have gotten out of it. But Mom made me come home from college for the weekend, especially to show our support. The food was the usual rubber chicken, with no redeeming features. The speeches were long and repetitive, and I had to do duty dances with all the old men in town, half of whom hadn't danced since their own weddings. You should have seen the bruises on my feet. You looked really pretty in the photo. She chuckled again. I can clean up quite nicely, you know, given hot water, professional help with hair and makeup, a clothes allowance, and some time. Anyway, what in that photo gave you the idea of abducting me? You see, the name just jumped off the page at me. I'd never knowingly seen a photo of your father before, though I guess I must have. Before I came across him, or more correctly, before he came across me. It's not that big a town, and he must be in the news sometimes. At the time I saw the article, I was still trying to figure out how to get Ally back when I didn't have the money for smart lawyers. Then I suddenly thought, if I kidnapped you or your mom, I could get a ransom and use that money for lawyers. So why me and not Mom? I shrugged. I couldn't see an easy way to get hold of her. She doesn't go out running on her own early on a Saturday morning. A white-toothed, real grin. Fair point. She might have been less trouble, though, and I think Dad would have moved quickly to pay ransom to get her back. He needs her more than he needs me. A whole lot more. I laughed. You're now suggesting we kidnap her and split the ransom between us. She grinned back. No. I want to know why I suddenly have some spare cash. Besides, I'd have to do all the cooking at home until you let her go. My father burns water, so I'll let you off that task. I'm glad because my kidnapping days are over. I'm going to move on to something a bit easier. You know, like dealing with wild cats. She smiled, raising an eyebrow in question. Is that supposed to be a compliment? I guess it is. You've turned the tables on me, and I have to respect you for it. Why? Thank you, kind sir. I'll be sure to put that in my resume. My abductor said I was more troubled than a bunch of wild cats. I'll write you a recommendation if you like. You know, Bubba, I might just take you up on that. Add some human interest and life experience to what's in my high school yearbook entry. I laughed. I'll have to think about the best way to phrase that without incriminating myself. Just make sure you accept any friend request from a guy calling himself Bubba, and I'll draft something and send it to you. Up to you whether or not you actually use it. So, tell me, what does your yearbook say about you? She suddenly looked shy. Oh, just the usual high school flannel. Yeah? Enough flannel to get you into pre-law. I heard they interview you and discuss what you've done outside class. Everything, not just your grades. Come on, fess up. She did, reluctantly. Lesser people would have boasted about their academic and sporting achievements, but she was more matter-of-fact. I could read between the lines. She had put in the hours of hard work necessary to get there, and it hadn't been easy. I could see how she'd earned her place on the high school volleyball team by merit. She made me laugh when she told me that lettering in that sport still kept her below the junior cheerleaders in locker room status. We kept talking, exchanging stories of our childhoods. Although her family had always had far more money than mine, we'd actually followed fairly similar middle-class paths, until my parents were fatally injured in that car accident when I was 17. If Dad had been killed outright, I'd have been okay. It was the cost of him lingering in that hospital bed for another 10 weeks that took all the money. Their deaths made the difference between me being a blue-collar middle-class kid with a college education and working as a site laborer in construction, with any prospects only thanks to the foresight of my current employer, Miss Grayson. Laura shed a few tears of genuine sympathy when she heard that, so I changed the topic to spare her from my past troubles. I learned more about her family history. The Graysons were Irish Presbyterians of Scottish ancestry who had come over in the 1700s seeking religious independence. They settled among similar folk when many Presbyterians moved to the Carolinas and eastern Tennessee. They were patriots in the Revolutionary War. Some of their ancestors fought at the defeat of the British at Kings Mountain. She might be an only child, but she wouldn't have to look far to find kin around here. I couldn't believe how much time had passed when I checked my watch as she finally yawned, got up, and excused herself to go to bed. It was 2 a.m. on Saturday morning. She kissed me on the cheek again and headed for her room. I locked the outside door for security against intruders and left the key in the lock. I didn't bother with the bars or closing either her door or mine. After she'd had me at her mercy with the tomato knife earlier, I didn't think I was in any danger. It had been an enjoyable evening, the best in a long time. Too bad it was probably my last night in the cabin, maybe even my last night in this state. Week 4, Day 1, Saturday. With the late night, my plans for an early start were kind of shot. I woke just before 8, intending to bring her a coffee. When I made mine, she must have heard me or smelled the aroma, because she joined me in the main room before the coffee finished brewing. I poured 2 mugs and carried them out onto the porch, where we sat again on the 2 chairs I'd found at the town dump, enjoying the morning sunlight together. It's a great way to start your day, I said. I try to do it every weekend, especially now, since I don't have to rush off to work. It's even better relaxing with someone sitting close beside me. It was just a shame this was the first and last time she'd be there, and the very last time I'd be doing this. I'd miss it. We were both quiet, lost in our thoughts. I knew I was looking out at this view for the last time, that I was about to lift my roots and head off into the unknown. I was also thinking I needed to start dating again when I got where I was going. I'd been alone for too long now. The last couple of days, when she'd started acting like a normal person, had actually been incredibly enjoyable. It made me realize just what I was missing, living like a hermit instead of with a companion. Our late-night conversation, sharing confidences, had been more profound and rewarding than any conversation I'd ever had with my ex. Cassie had never listened to me with such honest interest. When I made my new life 1,000 miles away, I tried to find someone like this girl. Yeah, moving away. I hadn't even started packing yet. Sure, I didn't have a whole lot of stuff, but it would take some time to load it all into the truck. I'd have to get it done before I took her home. I needed to be over the county line and headed for Georgia or Tennessee as fast as I could, and I still had to pick up my computer from the Hamilton construction office, which was in the wrong direction. Then she broke the silence in my train of thought. Grant, would you do me a real big favor? I looked at her in shocked surprise. I thought I hadn't heard her right. She wanted to stay with me another 2 days? Laura, sweetheart, are you serious? Yes, I am. You don't mind? No, I need the district attorney's office to be open before I confront Daddy. He's got a sharp mind, and I need to prepare better so he can't stand up to me. Please, can I stay here with you until Monday morning? I stared into her eyes. She returned my look without blinking. I chuckled. I guess I'm in no position to tell you no, am I? I'd be delighted if you stayed another couple of nights. I'm really going to miss your company once you're gone. One condition though, Laura. What's that? You'll be here as my honored and welcome guest, and you'll treat my home as yours. That response earned me a huge smile, and a kiss on the lips, not just the cheek. Looks like my date of exile had been postponed by 48 hours. Call it a temporary stay of execution. Time enough to take another farewell stroll around my property, get packed without so much rush, maybe do a little route planning. Try to anticipate where the police and sheriff might concentrate their efforts to stop me leaving the state. After a late breakfast of more coffee and pastries, I told Laura we were low on supplies. She absolutely insisted on coming shopping with me in town and wouldn't take no for an answer. I figured real soon that I was never going to win that argument, so I conceded as gracefully as I could and looked out for something to disguise her in. Cheap and unremarkable clothes, a tatty old baseball cap that concealed her hair. In my company, I reckoned there was little to no chance anyone she knew would recognize her, even in our town. I locked up out of habit, and we drove off. Okay, I still felt a bit nervous, but she was as cool as they come. Though every time she looked at herself in the rearview mirror, she giggled like a mischievous schoolgirl. She made me push the grocery cart around the store while she dashed here and there to fill it. We bought some ribs to grill that night, green salad leaves and a pre-packed dressing to go with them, some other food to last the weekend, lumpwood charcoal, a big bag of ice, and a new cooler. She got some clothes and feminine items, including conditioner, a mirror, and a hairbrush. A few other things she said would improve my cooking, and, of course, some wine glasses. Then we had to buy a couple of bottles of decent wine to fill them, and a case of beer for regular drinking. I was down well over $300 by the time we passed the checkout, and you know what? I didn't care. It could have been a whole lot worse, like a troop of Beaver Cub Scouts doing the bag packing and wanting a donation for bruising my fruit and crushing my chips. She was grinning in triumph all the way home. She hopped out of the truck, I gave her the key to the cabin, and we carried our loot inside. She handed me the baseball cap and shook out her hair. You know, Grant, that was a whole lot of fun. It was exciting, almost felt dangerous to be in disguise. If Mom had seen me wearing that outfit, she'd have thrown a fit. Did you never dress like that at college? I asked. She laughed. I live in a sorority house, honey. Geez, the rules are even tighter than at home. Makeup and jewelry must be worn at all times outside your bedroom, unless you're in your bathrobe. Dresses or skirts, no pants or trouser suits. Shorts are a big no-no. Sheesh. We even have to chaperone each other if there are non-family male visitors taking tea in the drawing room. When I go running, I have to leave the house through the backyard so I don't tarnish the cherished image of the sorority. Gee, what? They the daughters of the American Revolution? Laura laughed out loud. I've never made that comparison myself, but you might be onto something. They certainly have a high opinion of themselves and their social standing. That comment hit me like a splash of cold water. I'd really enjoyed our morning together, but she had just reminded me that socially we were miles apart, maybe poles apart. A penniless high school graduate by the skin of his teeth, and a wealthy pre-law sorority girl. From what she told me about her ancestors at Kings Mountain, she was most likely qualified to be a doctor herself. I turned to the stove so she wouldn't see my face. Tea or coffee? Tea, please, Grant. Could you warm me some extra water? I need to do some long overdue grooming. Sure thing, I'll do that first. I heated some water for the washing bowl. I'd seen the lady's razor and foam in the shopping cart, and guessed she had 3 weeks' worth of underarm growth she wanted to remove. Her legs needed tidying up too, but I'd seen she'd bought one of those creams for that. Why don't you use my room? There's a washstand and a real glass mirror. She got up and, unexpectedly, came into my bedroom, coming out smiling. Bubba, you've been holding out on me again. You've been enjoying all the benefits of a luxury in-suite bathroom, while I've been washing out of a bucket like I was on a Girl Scout camping trip. Where's the fairness in that? You ain't no Southern gentleman who'd always insist on the lady having the better room, are you? The grin made it clear she was teasing me, and I responded in kind. Okay, so maybe I do have a washstand with an adjustable mirror, a china water jug and matching bowl to wash out of, a chair back for my clothes and towels, and a window with real daylight. but it's not what I'd call luxurious. Besides, where I come from, no gentleman would ever discuss his sleeping arrangements with an unmarried young lady, no matter the circumstances. She giggled. Would the gentleman maybe go so far as to fill the washing bowl and jug with hot water for the lady borrowing his bathroom? Why, naturally he would, and feel honored and grateful to be allowed to do the lady that small service. 2 minutes, and it'll be all yours. I fetched the jug, filled it from the pan on the stove, and took it into my bedroom. I returned, made a sweeping bow, and smiled. One washstand with hot water at your humble service, my lady. She grinned mischievously. Why? Thank you for your consideration, Chief. Perhaps a mint julep afterward. Lord, but this girl is good. As you wish, my lady. I bowed again. She picked up her stuff, vanished into my bedroom, and shut the door. I tidied up a few things and set some more water on to heat. She reappeared with a mirror about 20 minutes later, wearing the shorts and halter neck top she'd bought that morning. She looked great. I whistled in appreciation, and she busted me on the lips. Thank you. I feel a whole lot more human now. I'll have that mug of tea, please, Grant. Then I've got some more notes to make. Coming right up. She sat down at the table with her drink and my notepad, writing quickly as she recorded and rearranged her thoughts. I stood back and watched her at work, grinning as the tip of her tongue emerged from her lips while she concentrated. I sneaked my smartphone out of my pocket and snapped a couple of photos so I could remember this day. A while later, she turned back the pages, reread what she'd written, and put the pad and pen down on the table. How about some lunch, Laura? She stood and stretched. Sounds good to me. Potty break first, back in a few. She headed off to her room. I fetched out the cold cuts and the rice and potato salads from the coolers and plated up our meals. Then I pulled 2 frosted bottles of beer from the ice, and we were ready. She smiled broadly as she sat down opposite me. Now, where were we? You were about to tell me all your darkest secrets. I was. You were leased in your girlfriends, the serious ones. You sure? Yep. Cassie. There was a long pause while she waited for the next name. That's all, unless you count Ally. You married your first serious girlfriend? I shrugged. It's a long story. I didn't get to date much in high school, what with my parents dead and no money. Getting my diploma was hard enough without any distractions. I was lucky there was a neighbor who owned a lumber and materials yard, and he gave me a job there evenings and weekends, which saved me from going into the system. CPS was short of money and approved foster homes even then, so they didn't put up much of a fight to pay for my upkeep. He had an old trailer that a security guard had used back before CCTV, and he let me live in that. His kindness got me through high school, but he had a heart condition and sold up the next year. They went to live near his daughter somewhere down in Louisiana, and I had to find work and a place to live. I got a job on a road construction project, shared a trailer with a couple of other guys, and saved as much money as I could. When that finished, I followed my roommates to their next job and got taken on, and then I ended up here doing house construction. Met Cassie at a bar one Saturday night, had a few dances, she agreed to a date the next week, and before I knew it, I was engaged. I didn't say anything about my recent thoughts, with the benefit of hindsight, that I'd had skills and a regular income, and that was probably exactly why Cassie had latched onto me. Ally hadn't been planned. I now suspected that Cassie's birth control malfunction had been another way of locking me in until she found herself a lawyer with even better prospects as a partner. I fetched 2 more cold beers from the cooler. Okay, Laura, fair's fair. A girl as beautiful as you has got to have had the guys chasing after her. You got a special guy who'll have missed you. She shook her head slowly and took a swig of her beer before replying. Yes to being constantly chased. No to anyone who would have missed me. It's not a pretty story. Remember I told you the guys were after me either as a trophy or because daddy could do something for them? Yeah, and I still don't understand how the decent guys didn't ask you out. I was brought up to be a good girl. Mom had social aspirations for me, and my aunt couldn't help but reinforce those ideas. Most of the dates I went on were at society or sorority events, always chaperoned. It was rare for me to ever be alone with a guy, let alone get close to one. I haven't really messed around much, so I'm not that experienced. She paused and sighed. There's no pretty way to say this. You need to know everything to understand where I'm coming from, Grant. My Aunt Janie was a wild child in college, really wild. Since Dad was 10 years older than her and serious about law school and all that, she felt like rebelling. She became quite the party girl, but still finished college and went into business. The trouble was, in those crazy times, she picked up a couple of STDs and didn't realize it until it was way too late. Not only did they make her sterile, which is why she never married, but they were probably the main reason she got ovarian cancer and died at the age of 37. She made me promise to save myself for my wedding night, and out of respect for her memory, that's exactly what I'm going to do. God, I miss her. Tears ran down her pretty face. I stood up, walked around the table, bent down, and hugged her. She sobbed into my shoulder for a while, her whole body trembling with grief. I stroked her hair softly and whispered soothing words. I probably had some understanding of how she felt, having lost my own parents, but I didn't say that. Too many people had tried to console me with that line before, and I just knew most of them had no real idea how alone and empty it felt. Eventually, she lifted her head. I'm sorry, Grant. You shouldn't have to share my problems. Laura, I want to share them. I might not be able to solve them, but I can help carry the weight, so it's not just on you. She gave a small smile. I guess having an aunt closer to your age is a little different. I'm really sad about losing her. She was a special person, a special friend. There's no shame in grieving. You honor her memory by remembering her with sadness. She must have been very special to you. She sniffled, and I handed her a roll of kitchen paper. She pulled off a couple of sheets and wiped her face, smiling bravely as she thanked me. You understand, don't you? So many others who knew her had no idea how close we were. She was a good woman who just made some poor choices when she was too young to know better. She made the most of her life, but she still missed out on a lot because of those mistakes. She fell silent for a moment. Grant, if I'm going back to my old life on Monday, do you think maybe we could just live a little until then? It was kind of thrilling going to the grocery store in disguise. These clothes I'm wearing are pretty daring for a judge's daughter. Sure, sweetheart, what do you want to do? Anything within my power is yours. She giggled. Am I your sweetheart? I kissed her forehead. I sure wish you could be. She looked up at me. Grant, Thursday you told me I was beautiful. I did. You are. Geez, you sound like you really mean it. I do. She blinked, bit her lip thoughtfully, then almost whispered. You know, I've always been a good girl. Do you think you might help me learn to be a little bit bad? I wasn't expecting that. I stammered my reply, my second beer already taking effect. If it's not going to hurt you, then okay. What would you like to do? She gazed into my eyes for a long moment. I saw a mix of emotions, uncertainty, desire, determination, anticipation, but there were some feelings I couldn't quite place. I guess I'd never really understood women, so this sudden mood change was way beyond me. Grant, you could have forced yourself on me Thursday night, and I almost deserved it the way I led you on. You didn't. You showed me you're an honorable guy. I still want to keep my virginity and my promise to Janie. But do you think maybe we could do a little making out and see where it goes? Teach me how to kiss. My head was spinning. One moment she was a woman, the next she was a girl again. She obviously wanted this, and I wasn't about to spoil her fun. Laura, I'd love to get to know you better. I promise to stop if you don't want to continue. And I swear I will not take your virginity, no matter how carried away we get. In return, I want your word that you'll tell me to stop if you feel uncomfortable. Do you understand? You're in control. She smiled. Okay, I promise. If it gets uncomfortable, I'll let you know. Now, any thoughts on what we could do? I picked her up from her chair and sat down with her on my lap, giving her a comforting hug. Her hair smelled clean and fresh, so different from when we first met. She relaxed in my arms. Have you ever tried just walking around freely without worries or judgment? I asked. She looked shy, but nodded once. At home, when nobody's around. It felt rebellious, even though it was harmless. Want to go for a carefree walk around the woods? Just enjoy nature. She hesitated. What about bugs? They're not much of a problem if we keep moving, and I have repellent if needed. She smiled. All right, but you get to fix any scratches or scrapes along the way. We laughed and strolled through the woods, holding hands and enjoying the calm. The sunlight filtered through the trees, and the peacefulness of the moment felt special. Later, we decided to take a dip in the lake. She admitted she had never tried swimming in a natural pool before. I've only swum in pools or at the beach. This feels different. Refreshing, she said, smiling. We enjoyed a quiet afternoon grilling and talking. As evening settled in, we shared stories about our lives and laughed over dinner. The simple joy of being around someone who genuinely cared was something I hadn't felt in a long time. The next morning, we walked around the property. She suggested making a trail or setting up exercise spots, pull-up bars, resistance training, things like that. That's a great idea. It would be fun to have something like that on weekends. I agreed. She laughed. Yeah, I miss my morning runs, but I'll have to get a new music player first. My old one's gone. I'm sorry about that. Don't worry. It was time for a new one anyway. I appreciate you looking out for me. At her suggestion, we got dressed and went out for lunch. It was her first time trying wings from the local spot, fresh from the kitchen. I could get used to this, she said, grinning. I smiled back. I'm glad you're enjoying yourself. This is the kind of day I'll remember. She grinned. Maybe you will, Bubba. Honey, you said you have a computer at work. Couldn't you let me see my emails? Sure thing, sweetie. I need to check mine too. We settled up, thanked the staff, and headed over to Hamilton Construction. I unlocked the office and started up my computer. You go first, Laura. Thanks, Grant. She sat down, opened the web server for her email, and typed in a really long password. How on earth did you remember that one? She smiled sadly. Too easy. 022219979 Jamie 37 Grayson 042922016. It's my default password. I use it for almost everything. Oh boy. Sorry I asked. It's okay. You know her story. I kissed the top of her head. It's kind of special that you honor her memory every time you log in. She knows she's not forgotten. She looked up at me, her face bright. I just knew you'd understand. Her gaze returned to the screen. Dozens of unread messages, almost all from her father or mother. Where do I start? I stood behind her and gently massaged her tense shoulders. My guess is most of them will say the same thing. Try the oldest 2 or 3, then pick a few others. I think you should send both of them a message saying you're absolutely fine and that you'll be back home tomorrow, unless you want me to drop you off right now. She looked up at me. No, let's stick to tomorrow. I might need the state attorney general's office to be open. She clicked on a few emails. They were pretty repetitive. Concern, worry, a little anger that she wasn't responding, some pleading, more concern, and assurances that she wasn't in any trouble and that they still loved her. She turned to look at me. Grant, do you have those divorce papers with you? No, they're back at the cabin. Do you mind if I copy them? I want to sort it out for you. Make amends for what my dad did to you. Do you think you can? I just know I can. Like I told you, something really stinks, and I'm going to find out exactly what it is. I'm almost 100% sure it's that little piece of work named Logan O'Brien, Esquire. I want to be able to challenge Dad on this judgment without alerting anyone. So he needs to be able to reread the papers, if he read them the first time, without going into the courthouse's case file archive. I'll go fetch them. If anyone comes, it'll most probably be my boss, Harry Hamilton. Just explain that I've gone to collect something. I wouldn't mention your dad, though. He's not a fan. He's seen the papers. I can understand that. I'll just tell him I'm a friend of yours. I got back there half an hour later. Laura was still sitting at the computer but had opened another window and was currently browsing the web, checking what was trending in the world. She turned and smiled at me in welcome. Hey, Grant. No visitors. I've read all my emails and drafted a reply. Will you check it for me? My throat went dry, but I walked over and read the draft message. Dear Mom and Dad, I'm so sorry to have worried you by being out of contact for so long. I'm totally fine, and I'll be home tomorrow. I met someone while I was out running. We got to talking, and something they said gave me a new outlook on what I'm doing with my life. I've been in kind of a retreat for the last few weeks, getting my head together and finding myself. I haven't had access to a computer. I think they call it a digital detox. Anyway, I love you both. I've really missed you, and I'm so looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. All my love, Laura. I cleared my throat. You haven't lied to them, but you have. I haven't told them a whole lot either. You do realize that they're probably going to press you hard to get the whole story. She giggled. Could be, but there's not a lot more to tell. Are you happy for me to press send? I shrugged. I had nothing to lose. If it helped prepare the ground, then it was okay. It might save them one sleepless night, though come to think of it, it was just as likely they wouldn't catch a wink out of sheer relief that their child was safe. Yeah, do it. Her hand moved on the keyboard, and the email was sent. Anything else? Yes, Grant. Honey, do you mind if I take you over to introduce you to Aunt Janie? I knew instantly what she meant. Laura, I'd be honored. We stayed at the gravestone for a couple of hours, lying on the grass, holding hands. Laura talked most of the time we were there, much of it telling Janie about the last month, some of it addressed to me, some just getting things straight in her own mind. It seemed to be doing her a lot of good, and I lost all my concerns about having damaged her mental state. Her tears didn't worry me. They were a healthy kind of crying. Then we drove back to the cabin. We held each other tight all night. Monday morning, we had an early splash in the swimming hole, ate breakfast, and climbed into the truck. She was dressed in the same running gear she'd been wearing 24 days earlier. She had a bag containing the other clothes we'd gotten for her. I pulled up a couple of 100 yards from her parents' house. I apologized yet again for having kidnapped her in the first place. She laughed and put her finger on my lips before kissing them. Grant, honey, although it's an exaggeration to say I wouldn't have missed the experience for the world, the past month has been life-changing for me. Maybe next time I'd try it without the ether and the cuffs, though, and the fear of what was going to happen to me. That part wasn't all that great. This weekend, incredible makes up for all the rest. Still can't believe I did that. Anyway, I'd better get going. Wish me luck. I did. She told me to look after myself, then pushed the passenger door open. We shared a short but intense kiss. She got out of my truck, and I told her goodbye and good luck. She closed the door, and I started the engine. Laura had explained that she intended to spin the story to her folks about needing some time to herself and having gone to stay with a friend while she communed with nature. She'd find some way to gloss over not having gotten in touch for a month. I had real doubts about how well that was going to work out, but I reasoned that she knew them pretty well, way better than I did. She said she wasn't intending to give them any time to question her. She would be going on the attack about what her father needed to do to stay out of jail himself. As I drove off, her waving figure receded in my rearview mirror, and my confidence that this had all ended well receded at almost the same rate. In a couple of minutes, she'd be back in her own familiar environment, her parents' large and luxurious house, and the conditioning of 20 years would immediately reassert itself. By the time I got to the construction site, I had pretty much convinced myself that perhaps she'd been playing a role, being so friendly just to get herself free rather than dead, and that she was even now talking to the 911 dispatcher or the nearest FBI special agent, or that she herself was sincere but that her parents would quickly force the truth out of her, with the same result, that I'd be hunted down like a rabid dog. It wasn't a good feeling. Not good at all, especially after the fun, laughter, and joyous exploratory intimacy we shared that weekend. Maybe I should have gone ahead with my trip to Missouri. I could have gotten her dropped off shortly after dawn and now been headed for I-85 before hiding myself in the border country between Georgia and Tennessee, buying a detailed road map to plan my trip north. It's not like there weren't several tens of thousands of almost identical trucks along my route. I could probably steal someone else's tags a couple of times a day to give the authorities real trouble in tracing me. But I hadn't left town. It was probably too late to start now. Running off would almost be an admission of guilt and weaken my potential defense that everything had been consensual. Geez, why the hell had I embarked on this mad plan of revenge? With my mind inhabiting a parallel universe, my work that day was not my best. Although I knew I'd absolutely done the right thing in releasing her, the suspense of waiting for the FBI to roll up and point guns at me before cuffing me was almost too much to handle. The other guys quickly noticed I couldn't do a damn thing right, and they got a good laugh out of it, saying I'd obviously had far too good a weekend. Despite my paranoid fears, there was nobody waiting in ambush when I got back to the cabin that evening. I spent a couple of hours removing whatever other evidence I could of my captive and the makeshift cell. A bit of wood filler and a lick of paint covered up where the spy hole had been in the door, and the drywall she'd excavated got the same treatment. Then I sat on the porch worrying. I wanted to believe in Laura, but recent experience had made me really cautious about women I trusted. Cassie had set me up to lose everything. I was so down that I concluded Miss Grayson was probably exacting some revenge and torturing me by making me live in daily fear for a while before she actually had me arrested. I had a disturbed and restless night. Every sound from outside had me listening for more, wondering if it was the cops coming to get me. It didn't help that I could still smell her soap and shampoo on my sheets and pillows, reminding me how good she'd felt in my arms. I decided to strip the bed and take the linens to the service laundry in the morning. Tuesday, I was a little more attuned to waiting until the axe fell on my neck. My work was only a little better than the previous day, But at least the guys realized I was having some kind of problem and eased up a bit with the teasing. I picked up the laundry on my way home from the site. When I pulled up the driveway, I saw a small compact car parked in front of the cabin. It wasn't a typical government vehicle, and nobody was inside. Still, I'd never had any visitors before, so I guess this was my nemesis. At least they weren't doing it in front of my coworkers with flashing lights, sirens, and the local TV station recording everything for posterity. I parked my truck beside the car, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment, resigned to my fate before getting out. There was still no one in sight. I paused on the porch before unlocking the door and noticed two brightly colored cushions on my worn wooden chairs, cushions that definitely hadn't been there that morning. That fact confused me even more. What the heck was going on? Suddenly, I heard running footsteps and turned just in time to see my ex-captive come around the side of the cabin and launch herself into my arms. Her hug and kisses felt really good. When we finally pulled apart, I got a chance to speak. "Laura, sweetie, what on earth are you doing back here?" She chuckled. "What does it look like, honey?" I came back. "Sorry it took me so long. Dad was being really stubborn until Mom and I told him we'd turn him in ourselves if he didn't start listening. Then he finally did some serious thinking and got a clue. I would have called you to tell you, but I don't have your number." I shook my head in disbelief. "Sweetie, I know we got kind of close over the weekend, and I'm really glad you came over, but would you mind explaining why you want to be back with me after I kidnapped you and kept you captive for 4 whole weeks? Why aren't you still at home with your folks, getting to know them again? Don't you owe them some family time?" She laughed and kissed me again. "Honey, there are a whole lot of reasons. You're the real deal. You aren't pretending to be someone you're not, and that alone makes you a better man than half the guys I've ever met. You've shown me that you're kind, considerate, and respectful. You had me in your power, and you didn't abuse it. You could have easily pushed me around last weekend, but you respected my promise to Janie, even when I tried to use my body against you. Your moral code wouldn't let you. You showed that you cared about me as a person. I missed you last night so much that I realized I've fallen for you." I staggered back in amazement. "You've fallen for me? Why in God's name would you do something crazy like that? You've got it all, and I'm just a lowly construction worker." She put her hands up to cradle my face, looking deep into my eyes. "Grant, honey, I just gave you a few very good reasons why I think you're the man for me. Janie would have loved you. I'd like us to date and see how it goes. I think we'll be fine. We share so many basic values, and I trust you completely." She giggled. "Oh, and then of course there's the big one. There aren't that many men tall enough for me to wear heels when we go dancing, so I thought I might hang on to you a little while longer, see how well we fit on the dance floor." I shook my head in disbelief at the direction this conversation was taking. I seized on one word. "We're going dancing?" She giggled a genuine laugh, clearly amused by the situation, not at me or my obvious confusion. "Oh yes, honey, we're going out to dinner, drinks, and dancing for our first public date. You were going to ask me, weren't you? But tomorrow, not tonight. I have other plans for now." She dragged me into my bedroom. "I'll be back in just a moment." She returned with a bright and colorful comforter, which she laid out on my bed. "There, that brightens the place up now. And honey, that offer of yours about licking me all over. I reckon you might have missed a couple of places last time, so I'm going to give you another chance to fully redeem your promise." It was my turn to grin. "You know something? You look good enough to eat. You mind if I put the bedsheets back on first? It'd be a shame to have to launder the comforter, and I haven't washed since work, so I'm not exactly nice to be close to." She smiled. "I can live with watching you wash. Maybe I could help." We took a swim in the creek together, then walked slowly back to the cabin, hand in hand. "I wasn't expecting you, so there's not a lot in the larder. I've got a few things in the car," she said. "I wasn't sure if you'd been to the store. How about working up an appetite first?" Wednesday morning, after breakfast, she sat on my lap wearing only panties and a smile and handed me her hairbrush. I'd learned all about brushing a girl's hair from my daughter Ally, and Laura purred when I finished. Her hair shone much more than when she'd just used a comb to remove the worst tangles. After she finished dressing, I locked up and showed her where I kept the spare key. We kissed again and drove off in separate vehicles, with her following me until we reached town. That evening, I finished work an hour early to meet up with her. She looked amazing, her hair tidied up, wearing a dress that showed off her figure and some heels. Our first stop was a men's outfitter, where she chose a sports coat, dress shirt, tie, dress slacks, and shoes for me to buy and wear out of the store. Before I got fully dressed, she took me to the suit racks, picked out 3 suits, and spoke to the salesman as if I wasn't even there. Then she sent me to get changed into the sports coat, while my work clothes were folded into a store bag. When I returned, she welcomed me with an approving smile. "You clean up real well, honey." I grinned at her. "Not as well as you do. You look like $1,000,000. She grinned mischievously. "That's a raise. Last week, I only looked like $250,000. She kissed me on the cheek, showing she wasn't whining about being valued at just that much. The store clerk interrupted. "Let me get the bill." "It's already taken care of, honey." I wasn't going to argue over money in front of the clerk, so I waited until I walked her to her car. "You can't buy my clothes." "What do I owe you?" "Grant." "Honey, would you have bought them for yourself?" "I guess not. I had some before, but I had no reason to wear them now." "Wrong, wrong, wrong, Buster. If I've dressed up for our date, then you have to be sharp as well. Anyway, you're buying dinner. It's what the guy does on the first public date. Maybe we'll start going Dutch after that." I knew when I was beaten. She was an irresistible force, and I'd be a fool to fight when she was heading in a direction I was more than happy to follow. I gave up arguing and took her to the Red Lobster franchise for our first public date. No reservation needed. Food reliably okay, if not outstanding. We enjoyed a couple of glasses of wine with our meal, then walked to a nearby bar where we danced for a while. She felt so natural in my arms, and it seemed like she felt the same about me. Her grin was infectious. "I just know it, Grant. You're exactly the right height for me, and you're a great dancer. Where'd you learn?" "Mom and Dad taught me at first. When I was 12, they made me go to Cone for a couple of years. That did me a lot of good. I did better in school after learning the discipline of dancing. Learned how to talk to girls, too." That was true. I'd had some nice dates before my folks had been killed. Afterward, I'd been too busy trying to stay out of the state foster system to have time to date. And which high school girl would go out with a boy who was not only broke and nearly homeless, but who also burst into tears when some memory of the past intruded, even if he could dance? I don't want to hear any more about that part. "Can you do a foxtrot?" "I sure can. I haven't tried in a couple of years, but I guess it'll come back pretty quickly." And it did. Having such a responsive dance partner definitely helped. She was good. Even when I messed up a step, she stayed with me, and that confidence really boosted my own performance. We stayed there until almost 11, then drove back to the cabin, her following me. She backed her naked body against mine under the wonderfully soft comforter that now adorned my bed. I pulled my arm around her, and she was almost instantly asleep. Thursday morning, we skinny dipped together in the creek, bathing while the coffee brewed. After breakfast, I left for work, promising to be back by 4. She called me on my cell at lunchtime just to talk, and we had time at the cabin for me to wash up and change out of my work clothes before she drove me back into town to the outfitters. The suit had been tailored and fit perfectly. She picked out another dress shirt and tie, and this time I insisted on paying. We ate at the steakhouse, where I proved I could handle a full-place setting of silverware and use a napkin without embarrassing myself. After dinner, we went back to dance for a couple of hours. She was absolutely miles ahead of Cassie on the dance floor. We fit together so well. She had an arm around my waist, and her head rested against my shoulder as we walked to her compact car to drive home to the cabin. "Grant, honey, I could really get used to this." "Laura, sweetie, I hope you will. If tomorrow goes as I intend, we'll do this a lot. I promise you. Are you ever going to tell me what you have planned, or are you testing me to see how quick I think on my feet?" She giggled, introducing my wonderful boyfriend to my parents and letting them get to appreciate him for the amazing man he is. I pretended to look around me. "So who is this guy? I'm jealous of him already." She prodded me in the chest. "Oh, you." We went to bed as soon as we got back to the cabin. The lights in my bedroom were on for a couple of hours as we did some more mutual exploring. I'd have to get some drapes to avoid closing the shutters. I didn't want to disturb any of the local wildlife by turning them into voyeurs. Another skinny dip in the creek before breakfast on Friday, and Laura ran through the schedule for the day twice. She thought correctly that I was too nervous for just once to be enough. Then she kissed me and sent me off to work. Harry Hamilton looked at me a little strangely when I took him the time sheets after lunch. I assumed it was because of my minutes-old haircut and clean-shaven look, or maybe the fact that I'd clocked off early on Wednesday and Thursday. He didn't say anything, and I headed straight back to the site to finish the afternoon. That night, we We were having dinner with her parents at their place. I didn't know precisely what she'd said to them or exactly how she'd explained her absence, but they welcomed me as if I didn't stink, and that evening, I didn't. I met Laura at a motel at 4, where we shared a long shower under hot water. I got my skin completely clean for the first time since the guard weekend. Then she dressed me up in the suit and tie. I looked pretty good, if I do say so myself. I felt even better with her holding my hand as she opened their grand front door and pulled me inside. We soon stood in their formal reception room, where she led me to make the initial introductions. Her father cleared his throat, sounding a little nervous. Mr. McKinney, my wife and I want to thank you most sincerely for looking after Laura these past few weeks while she found herself again. We were really worried when she left without a word, and we hoped she hadn't done anything reckless. But now she's come back to us whole and restored. When my sister Janie became ill and passed away, Laura changed, became serious and introspective. We didn't know what to do. Now she's got that sparkle back in her eyes, some real fire in her belly, and she puts it entirely down to how you helped her review where she was in life and where she wanted to be. We will be eternally grateful for what you've done for her. I blinked in surprise. Laura and I hadn't discussed the story she planned to tell her parents in that level of detail. She'd clearly made it sound to them as if I'd been her good Samaritan, therapist, and yogi all rolled into one. The manners my parents had instilled in me rescued me from making more of a fool of myself than necessary. It was no trouble at all, sir. I'm so glad I was able to help her and give her the quiet time she needed to think. The lady excused herself to go to the kitchen and put the food she prepared that morning into the oven. Her mother went with her. Her father offered me a drink and wouldn't take no for an answer. He got me a craft beer and took a whiskey himself. Mrs. Grayson came back with a glass of something in her hand and sat next to her husband on the love seat opposite the couch where he'd ushered me. I noticed that Laura stayed out of this part. I hoped she knew what she was doing. Mr. McKinney, Laura was quite forceful with both of us Monday when she got back. It appears my husband did you a monstrous injustice earlier this year, not to put too fine a point on it. Our daughter promised us both that she'd see her father disgraced and ruined if he didn't put things right. Of course, once we reviewed the papers against the additional information, we could see the problem straight away. Please, will you stay with us tonight as our guest? We'll make full redress tomorrow. I couldn't refuse such a direct appeal, sir, ma'am. From what I understood, it was actually deliberate fraud and perjury on the part of my ex-wife's lover, and your husband was only taken in by a con man. All I ask of you is to help me get access to my daughter again. Yes, I'd be honored to be your guest. Her husband studied me for a moment before responding. I guess my quiet reasonableness contrasted with whatever Laura had told them. That's very generous of you, Mr. McKinney. Laura made it very clear to me that I had totally failed in my duty as a judge and as a human being by signing such a document without carefully reading and understanding it all. All I can say in my defense is that I was taken in by someone I trusted completely, and I should not have been. I was in total breach of the Service Members Civil Relief Act, and my violation could have had severe consequences for me if you had followed up. I'm sorry, sir. Screw up. It's the Service Members Civil Relief Act. It's a federal law originating during World War II, updated in 2003. Basically, it's to protect people who are away on active service from being taken advantage of while they are serving. So, you were being taken to court in your absence for divorce and child custody? That was illegal. So was the sale of your home without your knowledge and the closure of your bank accounts. You should have known that anybody at the Armory would have been able to help you get in touch with someone from the Judge Advocates Corps who would have fought your corner and won. I thought for a moment, crap, I hadn't even mentioned the divorce to anyone in the military, just the pay guy, and he probably assumed I already knew about my options for redress. Sounded like I'd badly screwed up by not asking for help. I didn't know. I haven't told any of the guys in the Guard that I'm divorced. I spent 3 months in Iraq showing anyone I could pin down long enough my photos of Ally and Cassie. I was missing them so much that I just wanted to show them off. After doing that, I couldn't face admitting that I'd lost them. Damn, if you'd gotten some JAG lawyer to contact me to tell me you'd been on active service, I would have definitely looked at the papers again. There was no mention anywhere of you being in the service, just the false claim that you deserted your family. If there had been, I wouldn't have granted anything, and I would have contacted the military authorities to make sure you were aware. I remembered not to curse in company, but my face must have shown my remorse and self-disgust. I'd given myself extra months without my daughter when there had been a way to fix it within my reach. The judge must have seen it in my eyes because he stood, came over, and put his hand on my shoulder in sympathy. Let it go, son. It happened. You can't go back in time and change it. Don't beat yourself up. We're going to get it sorted now. I nodded and took a deep breath. He was right. I messed up, but there was no point in dwelling on it. I still wanted to give myself a good talking to, mostly for being so prideful and stubborn that I didn't ask for advice. Laura came back then and sat right next to me on the couch, our bodies touching from shoulder to hip. Grant, would you mind letting Mom and Dad visit your place tomorrow morning? I've been telling them how calm and peaceful it is out there, and how much quiet reflection and thinking I've been doing. They'd like to see it for themselves. Sure, the cabin's nothing fancy, but I've got free run of a quarter section of untouched woods, and it's really pretty. I missed it a lot when I was out in IR Rock. There were a few questions about the facilities, and I emphasized the two-bedroom setup. Then Laura stood up and announced it was time for dinner. I already knew she could cook with a real oven and knew how to use it well. She proved to be a really good cook. The judge and his wife made small talk while we ate. I grinned to myself as I held up my end of the conversation. I don't think they expected me to be as knowledgeable about local affairs as I was. I could see Laura trying not to giggle as I gently sparred with her parents. It was all good-natured. I suspected they were enjoying the novelty of hosting their daughter's boyfriend for the first time and relieved that I wasn't some awkward teenager who didn't know how to talk about grown-up topics. After dinner, Laura led us all into her father's home office. I helped her clear the table first. She took the big desk armchair and made her dad sit in a hard chair in front of her while she laid down her terms. I'd done enough psychology to respect her taking the power position and tried not to grin too much. It looked like she'd really put her parents in their place. This confident young woman was not discussing what I expected, reversing his decision on my divorce and child custody arrangements. Apparently, they'd already covered that fully, which explained the earlier apology. Laura pulled out a couple of sheets of yellow legal note paper from under the leather blotter on the desk and smirked at me. Daddy, about our prenup, Grant's cabin and personal property are to be excluded from communal property. Everything he owns now remains his, even if we divorce, no matter what the cost. I realized then that I was engaged to be married. It was a surprise, but the basic idea sounded really good to me, so I didn't argue. Okay, maybe she was a step ahead of the game and needed slowing down a bit, or I might have felt like I was being pushed into this. As you might have guessed, I'm kind of old-fashioned and wanted to make a formal proposal, so I interrupted her. One moment, please, Laura. We're missing something important here. I stood up, got down on one knee in front of her, and asked her to do me the honor of becoming my wife. The way her whole face lit up was something I won't forget. She said she'd be delighted. Her mom hugged and kissed us both, and even her father smiled as he shook my hand and congratulated me. Yeah, Laura had definitely gotten something big she could hold over her parents' heads if they were so quick to accept me. They insisted I call them Warren and Ann. That was surely going to take some getting used to after all my months of quietly resenting them from afar. Then we went through the rest of the clauses on our list. Laura spoke confidently, but kept glancing at me to make sure I was okay with everything. Her parents sat in stunned silence. Well, we split everything we accumulate while we're together 50/50ths, unless the cause of divorce is proven adultery, in which case we adjusted 80/20ths in favor of the aggrieved party. Any children we have will always have two parents, even if we don't live together. Now, I guess we need to decide what to do with Aunt Jan's money since it's vested. Her late Aunt Janie, Miss Grayson, had a successful career and left Laura a sizable trust fund that had recently become hers to control when she turned 21. I laughed out loud when I realized my kidnapped victim could have paid her own ransom twice over from that fund without even selling any stocks. The judge and his wife, Warren Enden, looked at me funny, but I think Laura's explanation that I'd assumed she had no money of her own satisfied them. Laura wanted to include that fund in community property so I'd get half. I didn't want to, but we compromised. I agreed that anything she spent on improving the cabin would become mine, in return for her and our children having a personal lifetime right to peaceful use of the property whether we were still together or not. She shrugged as if okay with losing that argument for now, but it wasn't finished business yet. We agreed we'd keep our own bank accounts but open a new joint household account once we were married. Once that was settled, Laura dropped another bomb on her folks. Mom, Dad, I promised Aunt Janie I'd be a virgin on my wedding day. I've kept that promise, but I'm not willing to wait much longer. Daddy, I want you to perform the civil marriage a week from tomorrow. Mom, we can do a small church wedding if you want, but it will have to be afterward. There was some mild dissent, mostly from her mother, but Laura quickly shut it down by saying we could just get married out of town, and then it was up to her parents to explain to their friends and neighbors why. Grant and I can apply for a Tennessee marriage license online. There's no waiting period and no blood test, $100, and we'll be married. Gas and a cheap motel for the wedding night won't be much more. Not what we want to do, but your choice. Mom instantly surrendered. Laura and her father went to get some more drinks and closed the door behind them. Grant, I want to tell you what a huge difference you've made in Laura. When Janie got ill and died, our daughter lost her spark. Now it's back. I've had to push her to do anything, and now she's asserting herself again. It's great to see, even if it is a little overwhelming and I'm on the losing side. I have no idea how you did it, but thank you. Warren and I will need some time to get used to the idea that our little girl is getting married so young, but she's so happy we won't stand in her way. We think you're a good man. Please don't let us down. I looked her in the eye, just like my dad taught me, and said, Miss Grayson, I swear I'll never hurt Laura. She's very special to me, and even though I know I don't deserve her, I'll always do my very best to make her happy. She smiled just like my mother used to smile at me. She told me, she doesn't deserve you. When both of you think you're the lucky one, then you've got hold of something special. You have my blessing. I had time to hug her before the others returned. I wasn't surprised when they came in carrying a bottle of champagne and an ice bucket and 4 tall glasses. Their toast seemed heartfelt. After breakfast, yes, I did stay overnight, but in a separate guest room, not with Laura. We took her parents out to see the cabin. They weren't all that impressed with the accommodations, but we got lucky and saw a deer and one of this year's fawns near the creek. They just loved the setting and the quiet. I overheard Laura putting her mother straight. Her mom had been a little sniffy about the size of the cabin and the lack of usual facilities. Mom, please stop being so dumb. Can't you remember that Grant had a house of his own in town until it was unjustly taken away by an incompetent and idle judge while he was serving his country? What do you think a jury might award him in a suit against that judge for malpractice, misadministration, and malfeasance? He won't sue, Daddy. He's too good a man for that. But with 20 million or so, he could build me quite a mansion. Grant's going places anyway. He's going to be a successful businessman without my money, and with it, we can live very well. I've picked a winner, you know it, and you'd better remember it. Lord, I'm sorry, Laura. I didn't mean it that way. I do know it, honey. It's just not what I'd hoped for as your first home. I guess you're right. He's fought his way back from nothing. He's also captured your heart, and that's what matters to me. I apologize. I didn't mean to insult your man. I couldn't see around the corner, but from the sounds, mother and daughter were having a make-up hug. I backed off a bit, so I was nearer the barn when they came back out of the cabin. No need for Lara's mother to know that I'd overheard her complaining and being corrected. Like in the service, you don't reprimand in public unless there's an immediate need for others to realize how dumb that action was, like turning around on the rifle range with a round already chambered in your weapon. We went back to their place for lunch. I helped Laura in the kitchen and quietly told her I'd overheard the conversation and thanked her for believing in me. Oh, I'm not the only one. Harry Hamilton thinks the sun shines out of you. I meant what I said. Honey, you've got a very bright future ahead of you. Mom was just surprised that I was happy about living in a cabin with no electricity or running water. The only suitable reward for that expression of confidence was a long hug and kiss. We were both flushed when we pulled apart. When did you talk to Harry? Yesterday morning. Why now? I know why he was looking at me kind of strangely. What did he say when you told him your name? I just said I was your girlfriend and warned him that we'd be wanting a honeymoon pretty soon. By the time he had that straight, I told him that we'd met while trying to address your divorce, and he didn't actually collapse when I mentioned I was the judge's daughter. I asked him to keep quiet until Monday. You might get summoned to the office then. I hugged her again, but we had to break apart when the timer dinged. That afternoon, we were all in the judge's chambers when a lady deputy brought an ally, who promptly flew into my arms, burst into tears, and held on like she'd never let me go. The deputy smiled, passed the judge a piece of paper, and saw herself out. Judge Warren Cornell Grayson then pronounced his revised decision in the case of McKinney v. McKinney. Given that the former Mrs. Cassie McKinney and her current husband, Logan O'Brien, ESQ, had just been arrested on perjury charges and were likely to be denied bail as flight risks, he awarded full custody of Ally and all assets to me. I was aware that I'd probably never see any of the money again, But that wasn't what mattered. Much more importantly, I had my daughter back, and she hadn't forgotten me. She was naturally upset that she couldn't be with her mom as well, but she hadn't bonded at all with SLE Ball O'Brien and was more than happy to be assured she'd never see him again. Laura picked her up, hugged her, and introduced herself as Daddy's girlfriend. Ally, sweetie, will you be my flower girl when I marry your daddy next weekend? No 4-year-old is ever going to turn down a chance to be a flower girl. Ally was no different. The promise of a brand new dress was superfluous but welcomed. Ally talked about nothing else for an hour. Sunday after breakfast, Laura and her mom took Ally for the first look at some dresses. Warren drove the two of us over to the jail. The weekend supervisor was expecting us and took us straight to one of the legal consulting rooms for privileged conversations. Cassie looked a whole lot older and worn without any makeup. Orange was definitely not her color. It wasn't a satisfactory meeting. At the start, Cassie had no explanation for her actions, and I wasn't in a forgiving mood. I had some anger saved up and was trying not to vent it in front of the judge. She begged me to withdraw the theft charges. I told her I wasn't inclined to unless she came up with the location of all my family items that she disposed of. Warren cleared his throat and explained that there were other possible charges: perjury, false instruments, illegal use of power of attorney, deception, wire fraud, and several other terms I'd never heard before. Then he started listing likely sentences. Cassie started howling. The judge stopped her. "Listen, Miss McKinney, you are a liar and a cheat. You wronged your husband and your daughter. You put yourself well within reach of the law. As you've just heard, you could be behind bars until you're 40 years old if you face all these charges without a plea bargain. However, I accept that you were conned by Mr. O'Brien and his silver tongue. That doesn't excuse you in the slightest. Thousands of service wives and husbands resist temptation and stay loyal and faithful to their spouses while they're away on active duty. You made a sworn statement in my court that you had been deserted. That was blatantly untrue, and you knew it. I could put you in front of a federal judge for that perjury because Grant was actively serving at the time, and he wouldn't give you a mere 6 months. I'm going to make you a one-time offer. I will drop the charges and personally give you $10,000 in cash if you cooperate with Grant in locating his items, relinquish all parental rights to your daughter, make a full statement about Mr. O'Brien, agree to testify, sign a confidentiality agreement, and leave the county forever. I'm not going to waste taxpayer dollars on you if I don't have to. Do you want time to think it over?" She was one scared woman and didn't hesitate to grab that offer with both hands. Warren signed her out of jail for a few hours. We drove her over to the place she'd shared with O'Brien, and she brought out all Ally's things and what little she had of mine. I was delighted to find that O'Brien had wanted to keep my father's books for himself. I hadn't lost them after all. Cassie had sold my grandfather's rocking chair but knew who had bought it. Warren assured me we'd be able to annul the sale and get it back. We took Cassie back to jail. Warren told her he'd sort everything Monday, and she'd be free to go that afternoon. She was weeping tears of relief as she told me goodbye and finally apologized for how she'd behaved. I can't say I had any residual affection left for her. I just wanted her out of my and Ally's lives. I wasn't entirely happy that Warren was going to give her such a large sum of money, but I guess it sweetened and sealed the deal. Using my truck, I took Laura and Ally back over to O'Brien's place after lunch to fetch Ally's bed and a few playthings like her slide and swing. We set them up at the cabin. Ally was all for staying over until we explained she'd be washing in cold water and eating something out of a can. I spent another night in the Graysons' guest room for the second time, with a 4-year-old cuddled into my side. It was something truly special to have my daughter back. There's no feeling quite like having your own flesh and blood wanting to be held close, especially after such a long gap. At lunchtime, Laura and I met up and went shopping for rings. We dropped by the Hamilton construction office so Harry could grin and shake my hand before my fiancé hugged and kissed him. He was still smiling as he waved us off from the parking lot. On Tuesday, we stopped by the courthouse to sign for the marriage license and pay the fee. Laura and her mom took Ally to buy a dress. On Wednesday and Friday evenings, Ally and I hid out at an ice cream parlor for my bachelor party before spending the night at the cabin. We enjoyed the camping experience together, but headed over to the Grayson house for breakfast with cold milk and juice, though my fiancée stayed upstairs to make sure I didn't see her before the ceremony. At 11 a.m. on Saturday, I stood in my dress uniform in the courthouse chambers, Harry Hamilton supporting me. Laura looked absolutely incredible as she came through the door on her father's arm, dressed in her white bridal gown. Ally held her other hand and made an utterly charming bridesmaid. Judge Warren Cornell Grayson married Laura Cornell Grayson to Grant Parker McKinney and pronounced us husband and wife. The bride's mother assured us several times that her tears were tears of joy, not sorrow, and I truly believed her. Next, we all drove to the cemetery and placed Lara's bridal bouquet on Jan's grave. It was a very moving moment, but at the same time extremely therapeutic and illuminating. I noticed the tears rolling openly down Warren's cheeks. The devastating period of his baby sister's illness and death had probably provided the opportunity for O'Brien to sneak into such a position of trust. Her loss had deeply affected Laura, so why wouldn't it also impact her father, who had known her twice as long and probably belatedly blamed himself for some of Jan's poor lifestyle choices at college? The second thing Ally's wicked stepmother did after our marriage was to take her new daughter back to the ice cream parlor for the wedding breakfast. That was truly a despicable thing to do. I instantly became number 2 in Ally's order of preference. Hopefully, when her half-sibling arrives next summer, I'll get a chance to make my own mark. Of course, with Laura going back to college and me transferring my credits to join her as a fellow junior, we're going to have to figure out childcare for the 2 kids. I rather suspect that Warren has already volunteered for the job. I don't know exactly how she did it. I suspect some bribery, but Laura persuaded Ally to stay with her new step-grandparents that night while we went to our bridal bed in the cabin. Laura had faithfully kept her promise to her aunt, but she really enjoyed the process of redeeming it. So much so that we did it another 4 times before going back to her parents for Sunday lunch and to collect Ally. My mother-in-law gave me a very tight hug once she saw the radiant smile on her daughter's face. I spent the rest of my honeymoon at the cabin with my new wife and my reacquired daughter. Luckily, if you run a 4-year-old around the grounds all afternoon, then feed her by 8 p.m., she's so dead to the world that nothing will wake her until 6 a.m. the next morning. It helped that her room, the one previously occupied by her stepmother, had no window to let in the morning sunlight, nor any excited squealing noises that might come from the swimming hole late at night. I'd taken a 2-week vacation that Harry Hamilton had insisted would be paid for, but it was no normal honeymoon. The electricity co-op arrived Monday to run the cables out to us. My father-in-law flatly refused to tell me how much it cost, only that he was pleasantly surprised since he had expected it to be much more. The electric company wasn't the only one measuring up that morning. Harry showed up with a digger in tow and proceeded to walk the site with the client while I unloaded his trailer. They did bend a little after that and allowed me to contribute to the discussion. When I questioned the scale of the work, Laura simply asked if I wanted to go back to living in town with neighbors all around. Okay, so I caved on most things. Why not? They were great ideas, pretty much what I would have done if I'd had the money and intended to live here year-round. I wasn't exactly sure whether it was 5 minutes or 6 months later when my vacation was over and I returned to working the construction site for a rest. Warren told me I'd had something called a busman's honeymoon. The cabin now had an unfinished but weather-tight addition twice the size of the original building, with a new bedroom and bathroom for Ally, a master suite for us, and a kitchen with a wraparound porch. The house was still recognizable as based on a local cabin, which worked well for the setting and hadn't cost me any trees. I was really impressed with my architect. She gave me a bonus hug when I complimented her in front of her parents as we held an impromptu end-of-vacation cookout with them. They looked a whole lot better than they had after their daughter had been missing for a month. I felt a little bad about having put them through such torment, but comforted myself with the thought that I wouldn't have had the chance to woo and win Laura if I hadn't abducted her. What they didn't know wouldn't hurt them. We held the church wedding just before Christmas. It was quite an event on the local social calendar, and I was introduced to a whole lot of people I'd probably never talk to again, but who I needed to know. Lara's mom took her step-granddaughter for a week, and I had Mrs. McKinney all to myself in a little resort honeymoon cabin on a Caribbean island, with no hungry 4-year-old charging through the bedroom door at inopportune moments. Man, that was an incredible 7 days. Cassie, oh boy. It turned out her lover was as corrupt as he could be around here. The judge had trusted him completely, but in the cases where he had an interest, that trust was so misplaced. I wasn't the only person who'd been wronged without recourse, which was why it had taken so long to come to trial. The judge recused himself personally because he wanted to be the #1 witness for the prosecution and professionally because his presiding would be easy meat for an appeal. The state judge who took over made absolutely sure that Logan O'Brien, ESQ, got a scrupulously fair trial that even the most ardent troublemaker or ACLU advocate couldn't possibly poke holes in. Then he sentenced him to a full 10 years for obstruction of justice, with another 18 months for perjury tacked on. An officer of the court going wrong was bad enough. A court official even worse. Some elements of the case, like the SCRA's violations, didn't get revealed publicly. I wasn't out to cause unnecessary trouble. I just testified that I had been overseas on active duty and had received no notification that O'Brien or anyone from the court had tried to contact me. I wasn't the only complainant. News that O'Brien was under investigation had circulated among all the local attorneys, and pretty much every one of them had something to say about one of his cases. The judge himself didn't get off scot-free. There were some fairly scathing remarks about over-reliance on his clerk, and he felt it was best that he didn't stand for re-election. The town newspaper took a fairly gentle attitude. O'Brien was an outsider, and the editor remembered reporting the illness and death of Janie Grayson, so wasn't inclined to crucify her brother. Still, there was enough criticism to prove the judge right about his electoral prospects, as he freely admitted in an interview. He had been in charge at the courthouse, so the buck stopped with him. Cassie appears to have kept her word. Aside from returning to testify against her former partner and having their marriage annulled as fraudulent, she's kept her distance. I assume she's moved on to someone else, but I don't care enough to find out. Warren and I gave Laura and Ally an extra gift at Christmas. Adoption papers didn't seem right with my daughter calling her stepmother Mom, so now they're legal mother and daughter. I'm still a sergeant in the National Guard. There was some talk that when we move into our apartment at college for the start of next year, I'd be a second lieutenant in the ROC. The state judge had some connections and reckoned they owed me for not publicly lowering the boom on the local failing. I disagreed, but Mrs. McKinney backed me up, even if she suggested I should accept something in recompense for my troubles. I cut the wind out of her sails by telling her I'd gotten lucky enough by winning her heart, and to please leave it be. My top sergeant had a few choice words for me about keeping my problems to myself. Peckerhead was probably the nicest thing he called me. He gave me a choice. Deliver a 30-minute lecture to the company on the Service Members Civil Relief Act or retrain as Assistant Sanitary Officer, which meant dealing with field latrines by hand. I surrendered quickly and asked when he wanted my lecture notes. After that, he shook my hand and congratulated me on my marriage. I'll be taking some summer classes until the baby arrives, and then we'll dive into college seriously when the new semester starts in August. With some extra credits already earned thanks to Lara's trust fund, we won't have to stress about finances or tuition while building our careers. Lara's gap year won't slow her down. She's still on track to be a top-notch lawyer, and I'll be helping Harry Hamilton grow his construction company. He offered me a great deal, including building up equity in the company. Lara, who also serves as my legal advisor, told me to accept it on the spot, then gave Harry a hug that left him blushing. You'd think he'd be used to that by now. It was pure luck. I ended up working with one of the only two people in town who weren't intimidated by Judge Warren Cornell Grayson. Otherwise, abducting his wife wouldn't have been nearly as effective. But she turned out to be a devoted grandmother and a completely dependable babysitter. Ally adores her. What's that saying? A good woman is more precious than rubies. That's Lara for sure. Even without her wealth, we make each other whole. It doesn't get better than that. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.